Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is expected to attend a pivotal Supreme Court hearing today. It's an unusual move for a Fed chair and a strong show of support for Fed Governor Lisa Cook as the court's weighing whether to allow President Trump to fire her. The president tried to remove Cook in August, accusing her of mortgage fraud, despite no charges against her. Cook denies the allegations, and in September, a U.S. district court ruled she could stay on while she fights the firing. Now the case could set a larger precedent on the power of the president to remove a member of the Fed for any reason. ABC's Elizabeth Schulze has more on this. Hi, Elizabeth. So during his speech in Davos, the president just mentioned his disappointment with Jerome Powell, but he didn't say anything about this case involving Lisa Cook. How big of a deal is it for Powell to attend today's hearing in person?
Diane, it's very unusual for a sitting chair of the Federal Reserve to attend oral arguments at the Supreme Court, and it speaks to this unusual, extraordinary moment we are in right now, where the Trump administration has really taken on the central bank. As you said, President Trump has repeatedly attacked Fed Chair Powell for not lowering interest rates. President Trump wants rates to be a lot lower than where they are. And we saw last week, Fed Chair Powell came out with this video message, a rare public statement, basically saying that he was under a criminal investigation by the Trump Justice Department. He said this was over construction costs related to the Fed's headquarters here in Washington. But Powell said what this was really about was because the Fed has not lowered rates as much as the president wants them to. So we find ourselves in this moment where there is this very public feud between President Trump and Fed Chair Powell as the Supreme Court is hearing these arguments in the case of Lisa Cook, who is a Federal Reserve governor that President Trump attempted to fire last year. Now we'll have to see, obviously, listen to the way we might get to see how the justices are leaning in this case.
Elizabeth, how do you expect each side to lay out their arguments today?
Right. So really what this comes down to is a massive test, Diane, of presidential power and what the Trump administration, and really the question here is, did they fire Lisa Cook for cause? You know, what this really kind of at the heart here is the central bank's independence. The Federal Reserve has operated as an independent government agency for years. And the idea there is that the Fed makes decisions for the economy based on what's best for the economy. So looking at the jobs market, inflation, versus looking at decisions that might be best for politics. They're not always the same thing. You know, if the justices kind of decide that the president had this authority, it would yet further allow him to kind of expand that presidential power in a way that we have seen happen. We'll have to obviously see how this shapes out. The court has previously kind of tried to maintain the independence of the Federal Reserve, Diane.
All right, Elizabeth Schulze, thank you. And ABC News legal contributor James Samples here for more on this. Hi, James. So the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 only allows the president to remove a Fed governor for cause. So how do you think the court will be weighing what qualifies as cause in this case?
Diane, that is the central and very important question here. The presidents and the administration contend that the president gets to make that determination, and that as long as it's within the boundaries of reasonableness, the president's determination is final. On the other hand, Congress set up this for-cause requirement, and in other agencies that have for-cause requirements, it has tended to mean things like gross malfeasance or negligence on the job. The conduct that is at issue here, in addition to being unproven because it hasn't been the subject of actual charges or a trial or even a hearing, is that conduct was unrelated to Lisa Cook's job as the Fed governor. So there is a real distinction as to who gets to make the decision of whether or not there is cause, and secondarily, whether or not this particular conduct rises to the level of cause.
Cook's legal team is arguing she's entitled to due process when it comes to the Trump administration's allegations that she committed mortgage fraud. How would that due process work if she's not facing criminal charges?
She argues that she's entitled to what is essentially the most fundamental element of due process, even outside the context of court. The fundamentals of due process are sort of twofold: notice and the opportunity to be heard. The president essentially came up with these allegations, or his team did, and said, "You're fired." She says, "I have what is known as a property interest," right? The due process clause of the Constitution prevents deprivations of life, liberty, or property. She has a property interest in the job, she alleges, without due process of law. She alleges that she's at least entitled to notice and an opportunity for a hearing to contest the allegations against her.
So what happens if the justices rule the president can fire Cook, and what if they say he can't?
Well, there are a slew of amicus briefs that have been filed by economists in the case, and although we're only a few minutes into the oral argument so far right now, just before we came on the air, there was an exchange in which Justice Amy Coney Barrett asked Solicitor General Sauer about those amicus briefs from the economists who predict that if the president is able to fire Lisa Cook, there will be dire consequences for the economy writ large.
All right, James Sample, thank you.